Thank you very much for that introduction. I think we're going to try to share this microphone. We're going to be switching back and forth a little bit, so we'll see how that goes. So again, I'm Peter Bull. I'm from DrivenData, and our mission is really to bring the power of data science to the social sector organizations. And we're going to talk a little bit about one of the projects that DrivenData has worked on today.
And I'm Giulia Benini, Senior Design Research Lead at IDEO.org. IDEO.org is a not-for-profit design firm that uses human-centered design to tackle social challenges around the globe.
So just to give you a little more context here, our talk is about bringing data science and human-centered design together. So taking two disciplines from two different perspectives and using them to make your own work more effective. So we're going to be talking at a big picture level, thinking about processes, thinking about how creativity and different perspectives can help you be more effective in your own work and hopefully give you some tools that you can bring back and use going forward.
So what's human-centered design? Who has heard about human-centered design before? Okay, great. So human-centered design is a creative approach to problem solving that starts by gaining deep empathy to the users of the products and the solutions that we are designing for, and ends with solutions that are really tailored to their needs. So human-centered design is based on the premise that innovation is powered by a deep understanding of the unmet needs, aspirations, and motivations of these users that are potential users of the products and services we're designing for. So we translate those latent needs that we uncover into ideas, and we refine those ideas as we go through an iterative process of prototyping and gathering feedback from those users. So good design, it starts with desirability, but actually good design is the sweet spot between desirability, viability, and feasibility. But in human-centered design, we always start with desirability. And what does that mean? By rooting the ultimate solution in the desire of and aspirations of the people we're designing for, we are far more likely to make those solutions fly and take off when they're live. So as soon as we nail desirability, then we work to make the solution technologically feasible and viable from a business perspective. So I don't know if you knew that, but the human-centered design process was used to create the first mouse. The first mouse was created by IDEO 35 years ago for Apple. So human-centered design started with a product-oriented focus. And nowadays, human-centered design is used to tackle much more complex problems. And I'm going to show you a couple of them. So since the first mouse, as I said, very complex solutions have been solved, have been created with human-centered design. Here you can see a picture of Clean Team. Clean Team was a project that IDEO.org works with, and the challenge was to solve the problem of open defecation in Ghana. So as you can imagine, it's not always fun to be a designer. You gotta tackle really tough problems. So this was a new sanitation system that was designed for rural Ghana, and is still being used there. Another project that was designed using human-centered design, and this is another case study from us at IDEO.org, is the Divine Divas. Divine Divas was a project created by IDEO.org in partnership with Mary Stopes International. Mary Stopes is a provider of women's health services across the globe. And the challenge for Mary Stopes was how to engage teenage girls to access contraceptive and reproductive health services. Teenage girls were not going to the clinics, and there's a huge problem in Zambia and Kenya, where this project was implemented, of unsafe abortions leading to deaths of teenage girls there. So they get pregnant, they don't have the money, the resources, or the courage to go to a clinic. They go somewhere and visit someone that can do the abortion, and they end up like doing an unsafe abortion and passing. So this is really an important challenge to tackle. So when we were doing research to understand what were the unmet needs of these teenage girls, we realized that they were really not opening up. And as I could imagine, like, I don't know about you guys, but I think I would talk about poop before I would talk about sex with a stranger, right? Yeah, so you don't really want to talk about sex with a stranger. And that's what the teenage girls were struggling with. So what we did, we put some nail stations in the town, and we offered to do their nails. And while we were doing the nails of these adolescent girls, they started to open up with us. There was no eye contact. The researchers were doing their nails and listening to them while they were talking about their life aspirations and their boyfriends. And that was an amazing way to get information from the girls. And actually, this trick that we used during research ended up being part of the solution. And today, part of the way that the nurses in these teen-friendly clinics operate is that they offer to do the nails of the girls as a first step during the sexual and reproductive counseling process. So the human-centered design process has 3 phases: inspiration, ideation, and implementation. And these 3 phases, they happen in cycles of divergence and convergence. So during inspiration, for example, we diverge. We explore all sorts of wild ideas we can imagine. And then during ideation, when we start prototyping ideas, we converge again while we make these ideas tangible through prototypes. And then we diverge again as we gather feedback from the users on these ideas and learn what works and what doesn't. So really, human-centered design, I think one important thing to notice is that human-centered design is really about failing forward. We quickly abandon the ideas that are not successful and focus on the promising ones. And then by the time we reach the implementation phase, our level of confidence that the ideas are going to work are much higher. And from there, it's all about converging through continuously refining that champion idea that we focused on. So this looks like an amazingly clean graph, right? But it's not like that. In practice, no, it's not like that. It's like all the frameworks, like they're just like too pretty. That's the case of this one. Because there's a lot of loops, there's a lot of iterative loops in each of those phases. This process is not linear at all. And these feedback loops allow us to gain confidence that our ideas will work by the time we get to implementation. So they are really important there.
So what is data science? I think that if you're at this conference, you probably get this already. But I wanted to offer my simple definition, which is that data science is humans and machines learning from data to be more effective and better at the problems we're trying to solve. And I like that Julia said that they had a very pretty depiction of their process, because this is one of the depictions of the standard data science process. And I don't think that pretty is necessarily a word that someone would use to describe it. But it has a lot of similarities with the human-centered design process. First of all, you'll see that it starts with business understanding. And really, I think for a lot of us, that means empathy with the users, understanding where our data is coming from. Second, it's iterative, like the human-centered design process is. So you see it's built into a big loop that is symbolized by the external circle with the arrows on it. And then it also cares about evidence. So in the human-centered design context, it's all about getting user feedback, gathering that evidence as you go in a qualitative sense. And when you're doing data science, it's about evaluation, looking at the metrics, figuring out what's working and what isn't. So now we're going to spend the rest of our time talking about a case study. We were working on a project together to improve access to digital financial services in East Africa. So this was a project that was funded by the Gates Foundation. And the idea is that there are lots of people who don't have access to banks because there isn't physical infrastructure. They only use physical cash, and they keep that cash on their person or at their homes, and they have highly volatile incomes, and financial services, such as banks, allow people to better save money, to have access to loans, and to smooth out some of that volatility. And so these financial services are an important tool for populations, particularly in the region that we were looking at, which is East Africa. And in East Africa, in the early 2000s, the way that mobile network operators worked, cell phone carriers worked, is all of the plans were prepaid. There are no subscription plans like there are in the US, but I pay $5 and I'm able to use my phone for maybe 10 minutes. So what I can do is I go into a shop, I say, hey, I want 10 minutes of airtime, here's $5. The shopkeeper gives me a card, I take that card, I scratch off that card, it gives me a code, put that code in my phone, then I can use my phone for 10 minutes. Now, the mobile network operators realized that that's a challenging process, it takes a long time, and so they enabled people that had airtime on their phones to transfer that airtime to other people. So if it was late at night and I was like, oh, I'm running out of time, I need to call my family. Julia, do you have any extra airtime you can send to me? Just by knowing my phone number, she could share that with me. And what some researchers realized was that this was becoming an informal proxy for currency. So people were using these airtime minutes as ways to send money back and forth to each other. People were going to shops and asking a shopkeeper, hey, if I send you 10 minutes of airtime, can I actually get some cash back? Because you're going to sell that to someone else, and so it doesn't matter to you, but I need the money to buy something else. And upon realizing this, a number of the mobile network operators actually formalized this process. And so mobile money became actually a digital wallet that's on my phone that's keeping a cash value. And they introduced things like savings products and loan products that you could access on your phone without the physical infrastructure for banks. So the project that we were working on is really about how do we take this technology and spread it more widely across the region and give people access in rural communities, in places where they haven't been served yet, make people interested in this technology and want to use it because the financial tools are powerful motivators for development.
So in human-centered design, as I was saying, we start with people. But what does that mean exactly? So it means approaching the potential users of the products and services we are designing for with a beginner's mindset, being really curious and open to understanding their unmet needs and aspirations. But what we found after so many interviews and conversations with people, and as we know by ourselves, is that sometimes what we say is very different from what we think, feel, and do. And that's why when we are exploring the unmet needs of the potential users of the services and products we're designing for, we use a set of qualitative methods that explore all these nuances. So we go out of the building every time, and we go and we talk to the potential users of the products and services we're designing for. So here, for example, you have one of our design friends, Daniel, in Tanzania, talking to a mobile money agent. And so we do group and individual interviews, as well as participatory observations, and even sometimes we put ourselves in the shoes of the people we're designing for. We try it ourselves, how it is to use that product, or how it is to live a life how they live. And it's this hands-on experience that allows us to deeply empathize and understand the challenges we're designing for from a user's perspective.
And one of the things that data science does here is it enables us to take a broader picture on the system and say, okay, what are these things that I'm hearing in user interviews that are actually true patterns that are spread throughout the population that's actually using mobile money? But we didn't just sit and do our separate work, come together in meetings and share what we learned. Actually, the data science team went out into the field and participated in user interviews. And that kind of experience is invaluable for someone who's then going to be analyzing data because you have a much better understanding of your data generating process. You see the places where important things are happening, but there's no data being gathered because it's not part of the system that then gets recorded on the back end. You also are able to put a human story behind patterns that you see. You say, oh, this is a behavior that we noticed. And now I understand why it's happening because I've talked to some of these users. I've tried to use the product myself. I've heard what the problems are, and I've heard what the opportunities are.
So for this work, we did interviews with mobile money subscribers, but also with agents. We shadowed some agents. It's human-centered design. You can shadow someone, and it's not creepy. Like, it's not considered stalking. You can do it. We shadow agents for a whole day to understand what is exactly the flow of their work, what are the pain points of their work stream. We also did intercepts and observations in areas that had a big concentration of mobile money agents operating, so we could understand differences in time management and flow of the process. We also tried ourselves the frustrations of being a mobile money subscriber there, trying to access customer service after blocking ourselves from our own phones and experiencing firsthand how really frustrating this could be.
And as data scientists, one of the things that we wanted to do was say, okay, what does the system look like from a big picture perspective? When I pull back and I look at these hundreds of gigabytes of transactions that I have, over 190 million transactions across the data set we had access to, we pulled it up and said, okay, how do I communicate what we're seeing as patterns to our partners that are designers and our partners that are mobile network operators? And so we looked at the different players in the mobile money system. Here are the subscribers over here. Here are the agents. Here are the mobile network operators themselves. And we said, okay, what do we see here that is potentially interesting from a design perspective? And one of the big things that we notice is that when you look at mobile money agents, they touch the most mobile money in the system, and they interact with all the other players in the system. So while we're thinking about designing and while we want to increase uptake, we recognize agents as a particularly high leverage point for designing solutions. Oh yeah, I need to switch that.
Oh yeah, okay. So who are these mobile money agents and what exactly do they do? So mobile money agents are basically human ATMs. I send cash digitally to Peter back in Berkeley. Peter goes to the mobile money agent, and the mobile money agent gives Peter the cash. And 90% of the money transacted in the mobile money system is cashed out. It doesn't stay in the system. So the agents are really important. But they're not simply mechanic human operators, like ATM operators, sorry. They are much more than that. This system is very new, and customers still don't trust the system. There's a lot of fraud going on, and there's still a lot of technical issues due to some insufficient infrastructures. And the technology sometimes is really challenging to some of these users. Some of them that just got a phone a year ago, and they're still trying to figure it out. And the agent is that person that is going to help introduce customers to the mobile money system and help them troubleshoot throughout their journey. So also agents typically are not only mobile money agents. They also have a shop. They have a side business. They sell other things in their mobile money shop. They try to make money in different ways, and they're also mobile money agents for different operators. So they're hustlers. They're trying different things, and they're really getting out there to optimize the money that they're making.
So one of the unique features of our collaboration is that we took this broad perspective to start out using data, using our user interviews and our trips to the field to understand the context. And one of the things we really wanted to do is say, how do we take the data we have and use that as design inspiration? So how do we incorporate that into that cycle of divergence that we have at the start of the human-centered design process? We want to brainstorm possible solutions, and so we get some inspiration from talking to users, but we can also get inspiration from looking at data. One of the first things we did was to say, okay, we know that these agents are doing other things other than just transacting mobile money. They're running shops like the ones we've shown pictures of. They're selling goods. They're working for other carriers. And so what does the journey of a mobile money agent look like in terms of incorporating that into their business? How does an agent become successful? So we looked at agents that increased the amount of transactions that they did over time. We looked at agents that maybe transacted seasonally, and that might be because they're in an area where there are a lot of farmers, and so the income was seasonal, and so the cash economy was also seasonal. And we used this as inspiration to think about, okay, what are solutions that work for these different kinds of agents? Not just what are solutions that work for an agent that we know is doing lots of mobile money transactions. Another thing we wanted to do is use the power of predictive modeling to inform some of our design. So we built some models to predict how successful an agent would be. And we took the start of an agent's tenure and we said, how much data do we need from an agent in order to get really accurate predictions for the future? So we built a model with 1 week worth of data, 2 weeks worth of data, 3 weeks worth of data, and discovered that we could get most of the predictive accuracy just out of those first 2 weeks. And this is one of those things that in data science, you're like, oh, I've got an actionable insight now. But we wanted to incorporate those actionable insights into actual actions where we're building products and solutions. So what this might say to you is say, okay, those first 2 weeks for an agent are really important. Maybe we need to design something for our onboarding process. Maybe agents need different kind of support when they start becoming an agent. Maybe they just need someone to come follow up with them after the first week and say, hey, what were your problems? What can I fix for you? Another thing we did was look at how we were measuring the success of an agent. So our mobile network operator partner was saying, okay, our most successful agents are the ones doing the most transactions. And the top 10% in terms of transaction volume was doing 80% in terms of the total amount of money that was transacted in the system. And this is a pretty common distribution for a sales system like this, where you've got a sort of 80-20 split. It was a little skewed in this particular instance. But one of our big mandates was about providing access to the mobile money system. And as data scientists, we know that you can't succeed against what you don't measure. So we needed a way to think about how agents provided access to customers. So using some of the tools of network analysis, we created a metric for measuring this. We looked at an individual agent in red here, and we said, okay, for the customers that go to that agent, how many other agents do those customers have access to? How many other agents do they go to? Which gives us a sense, if that agent was removed from the system, how many customers could no longer access mobile money? So how important is this agent to providing access? And it's much more likely that if you're in a rural area or an area with low mobile money penetration, that there are going to be fewer agents, and so you're going to be a more important agent. And now when we look at our agent segmentation, we can say, okay, the ones that are doing a lot of transactions are very valuable. But we can also look at this other dimension where we're saying we need to prioritize agents that are providing access to customers that wouldn't have it otherwise. And this changed the way that we think about how we're measuring the success of our project, because it's not just about increasing the number of transactions, but also about our stated goals around increasing access.
So after learning and gathering so many insights from qualitative research and also from the data science, we started prototyping. So what's prototyping? Prototyping, it's all about making our ideas tangible so we can show them to the potential users of the products and services that we are designing for and get their feedback. So in other words, prototype is a tangible way to ask a question. So in human-centered design, we don't believe in asking people, what would you like? Tell me what you want, because that's our job to uncover. That's why designers exist. And I like that saying from Ford. I don't know if you guys know that saying. If I have asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And it's basically true. So when we prototype, we try to show ideas to people and gather their feedback. And it's based on their feedback that from the sides, we try to answer the question and get to the right solution. And as we identify an area of interest, we begin to increase the fidelity of our prototypes. They start as a piece of paper, as a little draft, and they end up as a live prototype, for example, that is fully functional. So for this project, for example, we started with a bunch of inspiration ideas, and we quickly brought these ideas to life through very simple prototypes. For instance, here, Nivi is an interaction designer in our team, was showing a prototype of a mobile money flow that we made to be accessible to illiterate users. So you can imagine mobile money nowadays in most of the world is used with USSD menus. It's all text-based, and it's very hard for someone that is illiterate, like him. So we designed an interface with audio that would make possible for illiterate users to transact without needing to read. And we did that overnight after having an insight during the field. And after gathering his feedback, we iterated this prototype again in the next evening to show to the next users that we were going to talk to in the next day.
And one of the ways that was important to incorporate data science into the prototyping process is to think about, are we prototyping with the right users? We want to do this really rapidly. We want low fidelity designs, and we want to get feedback as quickly as possible. But we want to make sure that we're testing our designs with the users that would be most likely to use them. And so through the data, we can uncover the right people to talk to get the qualitative feedback from. So one of the steps that we took in our prototyping was to look at the feedback that we got from our interviews and converge on a couple ideas that we wanted to prototype. And one of the big things we heard from agents is that it's very hard to predict what your commission is going to be. For every transaction that an agent does, they get some percentage of the mobile money that's transferred as a commission. But they don't have a lot of visibility into how many transactions they're doing and how much commission they're going to get at the end of the month. And that's a problem because agents that don't think they're going to get commissions aren't going to prioritize that part of their business. So these agents, as Julia said, are hustlers. They have lots of other business things going on, and they want to be spending their time doing the operations that are going to give them the greatest returns. So we heard from agents that commissions are like the lottery. You don't know what you're going to get. And then we looked at the data, and that turned out to be very, very true. So when we looked at the percent change week over week for any individual agent, there were huge swings in what they might expect week to week on the order of a 50% change or 100% change. And that makes it really challenging for them. So one of the things we did is use what we were hearing from the users and use what we were seeing in the data to say, what are the tools we can give to agents that are going to allow them to better predict what their business is going to be like, to better understand that. And one of the prototypes we ran was a commission report. So it was an agent-facing menu where they could actually understand what their commission was going to be, how many transactions they were going to do, and what their history had been for the last month, but also help them understand trends in their business. So as a data science team, we produced these very pretty heat maps looking at when, during what days of the week, the agents were most busy. But this isn't a tool that you can give to an agent in a shop. They don't have a computer. They're not using a web interface. They're not using a smartphone. This isn't a solution that's designed for an agent. So in collaboration with IDEA, we actually created this text-based menu that still gave that graphical intuition that you get from looking at a visualization of your data, but in a way that worked in the context for the agents. So they could see the hours that they were most busy in the past month just from this text-based interface.
So one of the things that we learned during our inspiration research is that one of the biggest barriers for people to use mobile money is trust in the system, as I said, or lack of trust. So because the subscribers don't really trust the system, they build really strong relationships with one agent, and that agent is going to help them navigate all the uncertainties and the complexities of the mobile money system. So here, for example, you have one of the subscribers we talked to saying that she would trust her agent with her secret PIN that has access to her whole mobile wallet, but she wouldn't give it to her daughter. So, and when we looked at the data, we actually saw that as a customer does more transactions with one individual agent, that average value of that customer's transaction increases. So we saw an opportunity to design a loyalty program to build on the trust between agents and subscribers. So how this process of prototyping is that we started really scrappy, just playing games to test core mechanics of this loyalty program, really just making up games and playing them ourselves. And then when we started figuring out what was exciting between us, we tested some early prototypes that were just like pieces of paper that we would put in front of people to gather feedback. Very low resolution, very low effort to put it on it. And as soon as we learned what was sticking, what was good, what was working, we started doing more robust prototypes and gathered more feedback with users by using things like role-playing, for example. And this is a picture of us in the field trying the prototype with an agent and a customer. So what we landed on was a loyalty program called Pamoja, which means together in Swahili. And here's a picture of that prototype, the latest prototype we developed, going live, and we tried it live for some days to see how people would interact with it without our intervention in one of the agent shops that were participating in the program. And this loyalty program was not only a punch card that you collect, get a coffee at the end of 10 transactions. It was really building on this relationship between agents and customers, and both customers and agents get rewards by the 10th transaction and the 12th transaction, right? And so it's exciting for both the agent and the customer, and incentivizes both of them. It incentivizes the agent to provide great customer service, and it incentivizes the customer to keep going to the same agent. So as we look up at the prototypes that are working and we think about scaling them, we want to run live pilots. So pilots are basically tools that help us iron out the execution and the experience of the solutions we are designing for to ensure that they are successful and replicable before we scale.
And I think one of the things that was really exciting about us from the data science perspective is we got to contribute to designing these prototypes in a way that made it more likely for them to be successful. So by looking at the data, we were able to say, okay, what are the places where we want to encourage engagement? So after how many transactions should we give this reward? How much money should that reward be? And how does the data help us design this experience in a way that it's more likely to be successful based on the patterns that we're understanding from the data? But one of the other things that data scientists are particularly good at, and a lot of you probably spend your days doing, is running A/B tests. So the data science perspective contributes this idea of setting up good experimental design when you're running your pilots. So we can set up, okay, what is your baseline that you're going to be comparing against? Who are the people that we're actually going to target with this intervention? Where is it going to be geographically? And then how do we set up a true experiment so that when we say this pilot is working, we know that it's working, and we also have a quantified measure of the effect size of this intervention. And in addition to that effect size, we have an idea of how significant that effect size is. And so those tools enable us to be much more confident when we're building pilots that these are things that will scale to a broader population.
So one of the ways this project went to pilot was AMSHA. AMSHA is a retail experience that was designed by our partner, Airtel Tanzania, and that incorporated a lot of our learnings from the previous prototypes. So AMSHA is basically a high-touch store tailored to rural areas for rural customers that encourages customer loyalty and build on the brand trust.
So we just want to close with a couple thoughts about the best ways in which human-centered design and data science can work together. And from my perspective as a data scientist, one of the things I really appreciate about human-centered design is it puts a story behind the data points that I'm looking at. I get a much better understanding of the questions that I'm going to ask of that data and what some of the answers mean. I also get this really clear map of what the experience is like. And that's critical, as I mentioned earlier, for identifying gaps in the data that we're collecting so that we can actually feel like we've got a true representation of what's happening on the ground. And finally, human-centered design helps to actually solve the problems that you might uncover with data. So to go from just insights into something that you're involved in designing the solution for is a much more powerful problem-solving method than uncovering insights alone.
And as a designer, I think that data science strengthens human-centered design by illuminating what people do versus what actually they say, as we said before, and how this varies across populations. So there's a limit on what our qualitative methods can get, and data science allows us to understand and unveil insights in a much larger geography. Also, data science allows us to discover factors and moments that measurably change the outcomes of the solutions we're designing for. And that's really critical for us to understand and tailor the experience to the success of our solutions. And finally, data science allows us to target populations for new interventions and allow us to analyze the effects of these target populations as we move forward into pilots.
So to wrap things up, we believe that empathy, evidence, and iteration are the threads that bind human-centered design and data science and make them better together. And we hope that we've given you some inspiration, some ideas, some tools that you can use in your work to bring that user-centered perspective to your data science and contribute to building solutions that actually help people. So thank you so much for coming, and we're happy to answer questions.